Welcome back to That Rugby podcast, hosted by myself and Hughesy. It is Springbok week for me, Hughesy. We're going Springbok hunting. For you, you are going Puma hunting.
Yeah,
And
I think that's illegal.
It probably is. It all probably is quite illegal. Actually, I think you can hunt
Yeah.
Springbok, surely.
No, I think Springbok hunting's fine, but I think Puma hunting might be. I don't know. I don't know how populous they are in Argentina, but it might be illegal. Otherwise,
Yeah.
we might. But we're a nation of convicts. We're used to breaking the law.
Exactly, you are, and I guess it's a big round of footy coming up because it'll probably define the championship and which way it can go. Obviously, you are in Argentina. We are in South Africa, so tough games. We're going to start this podcast by making our predictions. Would you like to do the Wallabies Argentina ones first before we get into the Springboks discussion?
Do I need to do a score, or can I just say who wins? Because if I'm going to do it, and and TikTok can quote me on this, the Wallabies, obviously. That's my new catchphrase, I think. It's the Wallabies, obviously. You know, who's going to win? The Wallabies, obviously. Who's going to come last in the Rugby Championship? The Wallabies, obviously. Who's only slightly more dysfunctional than the All Blacks at the moment? The Wallabies, obviously.
Yeah, look, there's been a lot of news in and around, obviously, both of our teams recently. But I think it's interesting. Argentina, for the talent that they've got and even the way that they played against the All Blacks, you always seem to go over there expecting to get a victory, and they haven't solidified home field advantage that well, I would say.
Yeah, I think, look, I like a few of the inclusions for this one. Korobete staying in the squad, I think, is big, and not looking to, rest him or anything like that. We don't know the actual lineup. We've gotten the squad, the extended squad to take it over there, but we don't have the lineup. Langi Gleeson being called in to cover some back row, and Brandon Paenga-Amosa being recalled as well. I like those selections. I think that'll give some extra oomph to the forward pack. Carlo Tosano looks to be making that 7 position, or the backup 7 position, I should say, his own, because I think McWright has solidified that as his spot. I think the biggest inclusion is Taniela Tupou. A front row. The front row every game is being bolstered for the Wallabies. In the first game we had no Angus Bell. Second game we have Angus Bell, and we can see how much it improves. This game we'll have Taniela Tupou, so hopefully that really steps up the front row ability of the Wallabies.
Yeah, and let's mention that front row ability just quickly now, because I know there's been a lot of talk about obviously going down to Goldie Oldie scrums, or no pushing scrums in the last one, and the Springboks had a fair few words to say about it potentially being a strategic game plan. Obviously, they have one of the best bomb squads in the game. I don't believe that to be true. And again, I don't mind them discussing the point and what we say. So basically, I think it was Luke De Jager came out and said, look, you have a 14-day stand down after you have a head injury assessment, or 11-day stand down, I think it is. And there was obviously no game the next week, so that the HIA, or the head injury assessment, and them being ruled out isn't the end of the world, because they'll be back for the Argentina game. But they wouldn't do that if it was a 7-day stand down. You would hope that that's not the case of every team out there, that you wouldn't do that. I don't believe it to be the case, and I think it is a little.
To be quite honest, do they really think the Wallabies thought they were in with that much of a chance that was going to be the turning point? Like, the Wallabies are obviously in a rebuilding, reloading phase. So I just don't see. And look, I mean, it's a very Springbok thing to consider, because they live and breathe rugby. Let's not have any two ways about it. Their entire existence is based around rugby. It's part of the DNA of South Africa, right? And it's a great thing. It's why they're so successful. But to think of it at that level, and it's probably a knock on the Wallabies, to be honest, is I don't think they're thinking about it that advanced.
Yeah.
And
totally.
I think as well, it's the other point I would say to this as well is that the Rugby Championship is not that important to the Wallabies. What is important is their players getting experience and matching up in these scrums against a very, very good forward pack and learning from that experience. Experience is the best teacher, right?
Yeah.
So Schmidt has said quite clearly, like he is in this to coach these players up to the best of their ability. Hamstringing them and saying, "Oh no, just you guys have got head injuries, so we don't need to do scrums." I don't think that is a Schmidt thing to do because there's no benefit to the team outside of this one game. And let's be honest, this game is not that important. This game in the 2024 Rugby Championship is not that important to the Wallabies. Like overall, in the list of priorities, it's just not up there. And we've said this before, the Rugby Championship is not it's not like the Six Nations where the teams are doing everything they can to win the title. It's more about winning the matchup against your opponent. It's really, the Wallabies go into Rugby Championship wanting to beat the All Blacks and get the Bledisloe. The Springboks go in wanting to beat everyone, and the All Blacks go into it wanting to retain the Bledisloe and beat the Springboks. Argentina goes into it wanting to beat the other teams. I don't, and I think, the Wallabies, they want to go into it and beat South Africa, but that's not their main priority. Their main priority is not beating Argentina. The main priority is beating the All Blacks, right? Let's be honest. Let's be totally honest about it. And the All Blacks, you guys go into it, your priority is not beating Argentina, right? Your priority is not even beating the Wallabies. It's just holding on to the Bledisloe, right? So you don't mind if you drop a match as long as you retain the Bledisloe, okay? But you want to go into it to beat the South Africans 2-0, right? So, whereas the South Africans, they definitely, and you can tell this from the fans, tell this from the players, they want to go in and clean sweep everyone, right? And that's part of the, there's nothing wrong with that as well. But let's be honest about the priorities of the different teams here and what they're after, right? The Wallabies are not coming into the 2024 Rugby Championship wanting to win every single game, wanting to win the competition. The Wallabies come into this championship wanting to improve. That's the goal, is wanting to improve and maybe steal a Bledisloe, right? While there's some dysfunction at the All Blacks, maybe, like if this happened in Wallabies All Blacks Bledisloe game, I would give it credibility.
Yeah, I agree, and I also think the fact that you guys lost by 20 points still, how does it equate if they thought that was going to give them an advantage? It quite clearly hasn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't really make much sense to me. And again, even as strong as that bomb squad is, I go...
The previous week, it wasn't like the only difference between a Wallabies victory and loss was the scrum, right? There were clearly a lot of other holes around the squad. So it's not even like they've come from the first game with that plan to say, hey, or even with the idea in their head, like, oh man, if we just didn't have to face their scrum, we'd be all right. No, that's just, I understand why you might think that, but to be honest, like, it's just, we just don't care that much. We just don't care that much, to be honest.
And we're going to talk about this later because it opens up lots of options because it was an interesting moment in professional rugby and the highest level of rugby in the Southern Hemisphere that for 30 minutes we didn't have one of the more important parts of the game. And it's not, again, I'm not blaming anyone for that, but we're going to talk about benches at the end. But it was interesting.
So I've got one more thing I want to add as well, right? One of the players knocked out because of the head injury was Angus Bell, who was one of our best players on the park and was actually making a lot of progress for us. At the half, right, it was a close game. It blew up after we stopped doing contested scrums.
Yeah,
like
totally.
There's that as well. Like when we were scrumming, it was tight. There's a possibility the Wallabies could have gone into halftime ahead. So it's like that doesn't even make any sense either. Like, I just the fact that it's knocking Angus Bell out of the game makes it ridiculous for me because besides Corabetti, he was probably our second best player.
Totally. And that's what I sat there and I was like, this is I can understand looking at it for a lens and going, they're doing this to stop it. But I just think all the points you've made as well, like that wasn't the reason the Wallabies would be doing that. Like you lose an opportunity to gain experience against a bomb squad. You lose one of your best players in Angus Bell. So finishing up on that point, we now go into this week. We obviously think, as you've said, the Wallabies, obviously, to take on Argentina. I do believe that they go in as favourites, even though that you haven't looked convincing. You've been playing the Springboks, and even though Argentina beat the All Blacks, there's definitely talent there with the Argentinian team. I just think the Wallabies go in as favourites, and I think this is where Joe Smith goes, this is, as you've said, these are 3 semi-finalists, but one of them's a winner in the Rugby World Cup, and that was South Africa. They're a level above at the moment. Let's get some games under their belt, win against Argentina, and I think they do it.
Look, they've had these games against the Springboks to learn. They've had a week off since to rest the bodies as well. Look, they, as much as I say Wallabies, obviously, I do think the Wallabies can win this. It's really going to be dependent on the 10 inside center and Noah's connection with the other backs. I think one of the reasons we struggled so much against South Africa was the speed of that defense, just not allowing any ball play at the back. Wallabies are posting these highlights from not even that long ago, where you just see how smooth the ball comes out to the backline, the backline moves that they're putting on. Against South Africa, it was very much one-up hit-outs and things like that, but that's because there's no time to play the ball as well. So hopefully with the Argentinians not having that same level of pressure, or hopefully not having that same level of pressure on the playmaker, there's going to be more opportunities for the Wallabies to utilize some of that attacking prowess without needing to rely on crossfield kicks and things like that.
Totally. Now we go on to the big matchup. It's the Springboks against my All Blacks. Look, it's a big week for us, and a lot has happened behind the scenes. Obviously, Leon McDonald has left the coaching staff of the All Blacks due to mutual decision. Him and Razor, the idea of just footy wasn't going well. And I've got no problem. Look, Leon McDonald's obviously one heck of a coach. There's no doubt about it. Every team he's worked for has improved. He did it for Tasman and Canterbury, or Tasman and the Crusaders down south before moving up to coach the Auckland Blues, or the Blues, and leading them to a championship this past year. Saying all of that, we've obviously put our eggs in the Razor basket, and as a New Zealander, I want Razor to have every opportunity to succeed. Yeah. And to do that, he needs to be leading the way he wants to lead. And I'll go down with that ship, as we ended up going down with the Ian Foster ship, where it's like, let Ian Foster, the guy who knows what he's probably doing a lot better than the public perception we gave him, decide how he needed the team to run. And he got us all the way to Rugby World Cup final and a 1-point loss.
I think it's a classic case of too many cooks, and you just got to let Razor cook. Now, it's Leon McDonald is a great head coach in his own right, and that's probably where some clashes are coming in. They've both come from Super Rugby teams where they've been the top man in charge, and that leads you to doing things a certain way. I think it's probably one of the more mature coaching splits I've seen, but all sides have come out with nothing but praise for each other and just being simply like the tools just didn't fit the toolbox, and that's absolutely fine. Sometimes that happens. This is a total overhaul of the All Blacks coaching staff from Ian Foster, and inevitably things just aren't going to fit the way that you want them to. And that's absolutely fine. It's a lot better than what we've seen with some of the Wallaby coaching staff changes in the past. I think I don't know if I've seen a huge media reaction or overreaction to it, but maybe it's because I'm limited here in Australia. But from what I've seen, it's been fairly neutral. It's mainly just been public comments and things like that, like, oh my God, things like that. What's going on at the All Blacks, blah, blah, blah. Oh, drama because they lost the game to Argentina. No, I don't think so. I think you could see against Argentina, the All Blacks are developing their new identity under Razor, developing their squad and needing to do things the right way. And look, it's a mature decision. It's a difficult one, I'm sure, for Leon McDonald to walk away from a job, and like with not having another gig lined up straight away. So I think it's and that's the other thing to me. Like with these things, inevitably, if it's a non-mutual decision, that comes out in the media. You don't keep that hidden. That doesn't get hidden, So the fact that we haven't heard any of that suggests to me that it is, as is presented. And look, hopefully Leon McDonald finds himself a gig somewhere, Super Rugby or elsewhere, and can lead another team to glory.
Yeah, and he won't have trouble finding another job, I don't think, Leon McDonald. But yeah, I agree. Like, it is one of those things where if you're not on the ship, just get off it. And obviously Leon McDonald's gone, I think we could succeed in a different way, but I'm not the one making those decisions. And if I don't see that, then what's the point of me being here? Type thing. And
Exactly.
that's where he's gone.
May as well go I may as well go somewhere else, implement the ideas I want to implement, rather than being part of something I don't believe in and teaching things I'm not familiar with. I don't believe in. I don't believe these players should be doing. I'm not going to be giving it my 100%. I'm not doing a good service to the players, to the organization, to the country. It's better for me to step away.
Totally. Saying all of this, I've now never been more confident in an All Blacks victory over South Africa. All right, last week, a couple of weeks ago, I was talking about this aura of the Springboks. They're this, they're that. Look, they've got no fucking locks. All their locks are fallen over. It's a bit in doubt. Snyman's ruled out. Someone else is ruled out. You've got no locks. Barrett's back. Look, we're missing the group, but it doesn't matter. It's an All Blacks victory. It's coming. Clip it now. Luke, I'm going to clip this up, put it out there. All the Springboks are going to comment on it, and then they're going to go, we're going to wait for Saturday. You wait for Saturday, because the All Blacks are coming, Razor's cooking, and we're going to get a victory.
Wow, very bold. Yeah, look, this is gonna be a rare case where I disagree with you. I think the Springboks are going to win. And normally I don't like to say that. I like to, Anzac spirit and all that, but I don't see it happening. I don't know. You're going to South Africa, tricky environment to play in. They pull all sorts of shenanigans. And I don't think the Leon McDonald turmoil will play a factor in this game. I think actually that does give you a bit of a better chance because you're more unified, more on the same page. However, I just think because it is still such a new All Blacks system compared to a very well-oiled transition for the South African thing where Rassie was already involved with the coaching and the players at all levels, I think the Springboks take it.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to see you. I think it's gonna.
I think it'll be a close game, but I think the South Africans will just find a way to pull it out of the bag.
Yeah, well, when you're proven wrong, I just want an apology when we get here next week and we're talking about the most famous All Blacks victory of all time. I just want an apology.
I would love nothing more. If I'm going with my heart says All Blacks, my heart wants the All Blacks to win. My head says Springboks, and this is one of the rare occasions where I'm going to go with my head instead of my heart. Hopefully, this means by going with my head, I'm not going to run into a brick wall again. But I would love nothing more than to be here next week apologising for doubting the All Blacks. I'd love nothing more.
Yep, that's what I'm hoping. Okay, look, there was some rugby actually played last week, although we may have forgotten it. The Pacific Nations Cup kicked off, and I don't know
how you could have forgotten it with the most incredible intro of all time for the Pacific Nations Cup. It's like a Marvel movie intro.
That's what I was about to just mention it, and I was like, yeah, the Rugby Championship definitely has to up its game now if the Pacific Nations Cup is delivering that. Look, well, we didn't know because I don't think that had come out when we made the podcast last week. I think it came out like the day after. So that was probably why. But we quickly learnt about it. In the Pacific Nations Cup, Fiji played Samoa. It was a tight game until halftime, but Fiji ran away from it. And Japan played Canada and smashed Canada 55-28, and which was a good result for Eddie Jones. Even though I know it's
necessary.
Canada. Yeah, exactly. It was a necessary result. And to score 55 points in an international rugby game, no matter who your opponent is a pretty impressive stat. Still some defensive work to go on there. But I don't know why USA didn't play Tonga, but they didn't this week.
Yeah, they seem to be spacing it out a bit.
Quite a fair bit, yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't really make that much sense to me. But hey, it is what it is. As well, what I'd love to see is a comparison of the Rugby Championship, any kind of marketing for that versus this one intro from the Pacific Nations Cup. Because I've honestly looked and there's nothing. They have a logo and that's like it. There's no like intro or hype video. It's just you have a like the like maybe like the shield crosses over at the start of the game, but there's like nothing. And then you see this Pacific Nations. It looked, again, and I have seen this a lot. There's a rugby account on Twitter who I have a love-hate relationship with, and it's called Tier 2 Rugby, I think, or T2 Rugby. And it really focuses on a lot of these tier 2 and small nations, as the name implies. A lot of the time, they're just bagging the tier 1 nations, though. However, I think a very valid criticism they have brought up, or a valid opinion, is that this is something that the tier 1 nations too often just rest on their laurels about the importance of their games, right? We, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and by association Argentina, just think this is a rugby championship. This is the pinnacle of international rugby for this year. We don't need to advertise. We don't need to come up with cool interviews. People are going to watch this, right? People are going to want to watch this because it's international rugby. To a certain extent, that is true. But there's also comes a point, and it's especially getting more and more obvious now, that you can't rest on those laurels anymore, that you need to be bringing fresh blood into the fandom, into the game. And this is something you can learn from tier 2 nations. What I absolutely love about this camp is it highlights the crowds that these tier 2 countries get for their games, right? Did you know? I think it's one of the top watched games at this last Rugby World Cup was Uruguay versus France, with the majority of viewers coming from Uruguay. I think about 11 million viewers, right? That's incredible. These tier 2 countries are obviously doing something right for rugby and for advertising rugby and for getting people into the game. This is something that tier 1 nations need to, and it's a bit of historical snobbery, I think, of looking down on these tier 2 nations. I think we need to put aside some egos and look at what we can learn from these smaller nations.
Totally. And I will make this mention, Pacific Nations Cup, as I believe, is a World Rugby run event. Tri Nations, the Rugby Championship, is a SANZA run event.
SANZA, yeah.
And as we've mentioned, we don't like SANZA. SANZA are idiots. They're just silly. They have no idea what's going on. However, they need to fix it, and we'll sit here and we'll patiently wait. But when you see stuff like that for a Pacific Nations Cup, and even the stuff you see coming out of the Six Nations, you just go, how can we be this fucking useless? How can we be this useless?
Look, I've also seen some rumblings from some other Twitter accounts that both Europeans and South Africans aren't happy with South Africa being in those European competitions. So maybe we see a return of South Africa to Super Rugby. I don't know. Which would be beneficial to all parties, I think.
Well, I think South Africa are in the best spot because if they don't come, it doesn't hurt them. As even with European rugby and everything like that, it's a good level. I think we get helped more by having the South African teams come back to Super Rugby than they get helped. Like they could be still playing at a high level. I'd be interested
to know viewership differences between and attendance with those European games compared to when they were in Super Rugby. I know. I just feel like as fans, you would get more fired up to watch, the South African teams play the New Zealand and Australian teams than you would against the European teams.
Yeah,
because you've got that extra skin in the game for the Rugby Championship. Then you know what I mean. And it's like then it's SANZA. It's a unified SANZA product. I don't know. That's just how I sort of think about it. Maybe I'm totally wrong. Maybe I'm missing the mark. But that's just what I think.
No, I can see that, and I imagine if they did come back, well, those games would go down a treat, wouldn't they? Because especially after a 4-year hiatus, 5-year potential, 6-year potential hiatus of not playing each other, it would be some fire in the belly stuff.
Yeah.
A man who seems like he's got some fire in his belly still, Israel Folau, has been doing the rounds of the podcast and jumped on Isaac John's podcast, which was quite insightful. I had to listen to it. And he said many things, and obviously he's been in and out of the media before and said some things before. But he believed with his confidence and his ability, he could walk straight back into the Wallabies if he'd given the opportunity. Hughesy, I want to hear your thoughts on this as a Wallabies fan.
I don't think he'd walk straight in. I think he could maybe compete for a spot. I don't know though. Like he hasn't been exactly lighting the world on fire since he's been away from the Wallabies. It's not as if he's been the best player, and it's just like, oh man, if only he hadn't said those things, I wish he'd still be playing for the Wallabies. He's 35 now as well. I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think he'd walk in. I think he has the ability to fight his way in, but he would definitely not walk in. And yeah, I don't know. I just don't think he would walk straight in.
And listening to the podcast, it actually sounds a lot better than those words, because he talks about it's actually more about his confidence in himself and his abilities. And there's no doubt his God-given abilities. That he is one of the most talented rugby players in the world, and that time that he played Super Rugby and was top try scorer in the least amount of games doing it, it was crazy. Like, he was a level above. I agree with you. I don't know if he is that level above. But my second question is now, follow-up question, obviously, would you take him back in the Wallabies?
I don't think so. I don't think he. I don't know if he has that ability that would elevate the Wallabies enough where I'd want him in the team. Like, I don't think it's. I don't think so. I don't like he. I've seen some highlights and stuff, and it's been like, okay, yeah, he's got some ability still, but I don't think he'd be. No, not to be honest, not really. I mean, and I'm saying that purely from the rugby perspective, not even getting into my own personal feelings about his words and things like that. Um, yeah, I just no,
Could
I
you
don't
put
think
the
so.
past grievances behind and go, look, if he was killing the game, could you put those past grievances behind?
Well, if he apologized for what he said, then yeah, I don't think he would apologize. And look, that's what his beliefs, and I think we talked about it before. Look, those are his beliefs. If that's what he truly believes, then that is what it is. But I don't think there's place for those beliefs in today's society where you're telling people the way that they live their life is going to send them to hell, right? Like, and especially putting that out there on social media, which we know is so impactful. And we've talked, in recent times about the impact of social media on players' mental health and referees and officials' mental health, where, we're having people being sent death threats and things like that. To have a famous rugby player who, arguably at the time, the most famous rugby player in Australia, putting that message out there, I think that's I don't think that's an acceptable message in today's society. And people can argue me up and down the street saying, "Oh, it's their religious beliefs, or that's their beliefs; they should be entitled to it." We used to believe some people were 3/5 of others. We used to believe in slavery in this country, Australia. We used to believe that Aboriginals weren't people and didn't have land, and we used to hunt them for sport. Beliefs change over time, and what's acceptable changes over time. And when you're a person in a position of power and influence over others, your responsibility for communicating messages and beliefs is that much more important and that much more in focus than anyone else. And uh, I understand that he truly believes in his faith and that he wants to help other people through his faith, and I think that is commendable. I think that's absolutely commendable. I think the way he went about it was wrong, and I think that, look, if you personally um, believe that people are going to hell based on their sexual orientation, I think if you believe someone's going to hell based on something that is legal and part of our society, I think that's something that is not to be shared. I don't know. It's like, there are certain things that it's all based on societal values. We live in a collective society. We agree on a set of values and principles, and those are enshrined in law, right? And especially when it comes to personal freedom, we're really going off topic with rugby here. But when you're telling people that those things are going to send them to hell, when there's a group of disadvantaged people that have been attacked and abused for years, that's not something to put out into the world. I think there's definitely better ways of spreading Christian messages. And I'm not necessarily a person of faith myself, but there are people of faith that I know who are very strong in their beliefs. And when they encounter things that they don't agree with, they just say, "I don't agree with that," but they don't say you're going to hell because of that. And I think that's the difference, right? Is you're allowed to say you don't agree with something. I think when you condemn people because of it, that's when it starts to cross a line. And look, there's more nuance to it than that, but we're not here to delve into all of that.
Totally, yeah. Like, I think you put it very well, Husey. I think sometimes with these rugbies, we've got to understand that there's more than a world of rugby out there.
Rugby is more than a game, and I think that's a
Exactly.
slogan that they've used before, or maybe other sports have. But rugby's more than a game. It is part of our society. Saturday, Sunday Arvo footy. It's a way people connect with each other, make friends, share moments, make lifelong friends. And so, when you're looking at squads, you've got to consider things that beyond just their ability on the field as well. And yeah, look, I just think that that's something that if he did want to play for Australia again, he need to think about and think, look, you know, and consider his options there. Look, he made his decision, and he has to live with the consequences. And to be fair to him, he has been living with the consequences. He's been doing quite well, and he hasn't been spinning the dummy over much and things like that. So look, if that's his level of commitment and faith and belief, then that is what it is. And I think that it just makes sense that those values don't mesh with the values that Australia and the Wallabies want to be promoting. And so much like Razor and Liam McDonald, it's best to just part ways and leave it at that.
Totally. Shall we move on to our last topic today, which is just a bit of ideas for the bench. Now, I've seen a few ideas pop up, and this comes back to that Wallabies no scrum due to the props. And I was really interested. So it's like, look, there's obviously lots of talk with the 7-1, 6-2 blend split that it doesn't allow everyone to be playing rugby. Ideally, you should have 3 backs, 5 forwards, and that allows, reserves there. So do we limit it? Do we then, and then the reasoning behind limiting it, and there was some good points, was like, hey, if you only had certain amount of subs, you're not going to have these bigger contacts because you're not bringing on players and so on and so forth that are, able to, you've got to play 80 minutes, and so you can't be the size you are and survive for 80 minutes on a rugby field is the way the thinking, And then there was the idea of we just set rules for it, so, hey, you only have 5 or so subs and you can make those whenever. The last one, which I quite liked, which I'm really interested to hear your thoughts in, and it was actually Sam Tompkins, I believe, talking about it with Rugby League, but can transition over to Rugby Union. The All Blacks have named a 36-man squad to go over to South Africa. Why can't both teams name 30 players and, like football, where you have the full squad there and then choose to make the X amount of subs, and then you have every single player available, and then you choose the X amount of subs, and we say this is the amount of subs. Say it is 8, then you can make those 8 subs, and then if you do have those injuries, you can then follow up because he's probably not going to use all of the 8 subs. You've got more props on the bench ready to be used. I don't know. There's lots of ideas out there. I just wanted to hear your thoughts on it.
I like that one, and it's slightly different than what I was thinking, but I like that because then it also adds another layer of strategy and game planning to the game. Like if you're really getting beaten up, or if your props really getting beaten up in the scrum, maybe you go for a further amount of prop subs. I don't like the idea of limiting the bench because I think one of the great things about rugby union is it's a game for many different body shapes and sizes, and I think forcing people to play 80 minutes will limit, particularly props and front rows, will limit the body shapes and sizes that are able to play. And that's rugby's an inclusive game, so I don't necessarily like that. The idea I had was similar to rugby league, where you have your set bench and then you have an emergency bench for all positions that can only be activated if a play is ruled out through something like a head injury, where they can't return or they are ruled out with injury. There's that. It's not a super well fleshed out idea. I don't even like the way necessarily rugby league does it, where it has to be because of foul play from the other team, but it has to be after a certain number of people are knocked out and things like that. It's a bit nebulous there, or a bit too difficult to activate that 18th man for rugby league. So yeah, I think it could definitely do with some tinkering. And the idea of an extended bench so you have a 15-man bench, but you're only allowed to make 8 substitutions during a game. So which 8 players do you pick? That's a great idea. And then that's not necessarily beneficial to the team that say they have to make an extra prop substitution. That then limits their substitutions they can make elsewhere. So maybe an outside back they were looking to bring on later in the game won't see the field, or maybe one of your halves have to play the full 80 minutes or something like that. I think that's a good idea, and that it's not a straight benefit to the team. There is a detraction to it as well.
Totally, yeah, and that's what I clicked. I was like, most of these squads are taking 30 plus players around,
Yeah.
the Springboks have 30-plus players. Why not say, look, you can have them all on the bench? You know, like Manny Lebok, I know he played the second game off the bench, but imagine if he was on that bench in that first one and, you know, like he's ready to go. Like he's not playing because he doesn't want to. He's just, you know, there. So if you've got these players ready to play, you get those tactical decisions as we see in like football, like the Euros with Ivan Toney and Ollie Watkins, and decisions have to be made, and I think it'd open up the game more. And I go, if you're taking 36, mate, you don't need the full 36, but let's say it is 30 or even, you know, 28 or whatever it is. What do we normally have? 23. So say, yeah, you're 30. So you've got an extra 7 there. You could make, you know, 8 subs. And yeah, I think then it opens the, as we've said, like you could have 2 more props there if they're injuries. And maybe you do go, hey, there's still a head injury assessment emergency sub that we could make if that counts or whatever. But yeah, I just like the idea that everyone you're taking a whole squad, not that whole squad's playing, but if they're available, they were on the bench, they're ready to go. I thought that was a good idea as well from Sam Tompkins. But I'm interested to hear other people's opinion on the bench setups as well in rugby. Doesn't necessarily have to change. It was more the fact that we sat there and watched that Wallabies Springboks game, and, you know, 48 minutes in, I think it was, for 30 minutes we had golden oldie scrums, which at a professional level, I don't like the idea of either. As much as we've kind of said, like the Springboks, I don't think the Wallabies did it on purpose. I don't like the idea of goldie oldie scrums. Scrums such a vital part of what rugby is as an image. To sit there and, as someone said, how do you explain that to someone who's watching it for the first time? Probably not the best way to explain it. So yeah, let us know your thoughts on that. But yes, it's a big week in the Rugby Championship world. 2 very heavy games to be watched. Wallabies, obviously the Wallabies for a win. And
the Wallabies, obviously, yeah.
And hopefully my All Blacks get the job done. But thank you for joining us. I have been Luke. That has been Husey. We are That Rugby Podcast. We will see you next time. Goodbye.
Peace.